There we go. All right, so international trade. So when we look at international trade, we're going to look at two countries, two economies, and them coming to the table. The analogy that I use for international trade for us to understand the importance of it, and Rodney, your research was on international trade, right?
Yes.
Okay, is you guys remember King Arthur and the Knights of the what? Round Table. Why was the table round? Why was the table round? Excalibur.
Pretty sure didn't make all the knights equal at the table.
Okay, and it was important that everybody had a seat and that you could see one another. Here's the thing with international trade is if your economy has something that I need, it's vital that you are at that table and that we can actually have an exchange. Here's what we have to understand. I'll just put one more seat here. When the United States is involved in foreign policy and activities, it's not completely humanitarian in nature. I have students ask me all the time, why are we over there? Why are we doing this for these people? And we got people starving in our country and all that. And I understand that. But please note, there is an agenda as to why we are there. There's an agenda and there's a purpose for us being there. If we, as an economy with our 5 factors of production, if we try to produce everything that we need for our nation, we will not use our resources effectively. And remember, there's no waste in economics. We need to produce what we do well and then come to the table and trade. Because if I can buy it cheaper abroad and bring it back to the country, and then they can buy something from me and they take it to their country, the better off we are altogether. One of the things that happened during the whole big crash of 1929 and 1930 was that somehow, and this is in your text, you probably already read the Smoot-Hawley Act, was somehow we thought that it would be beneficial for our economy because of the crash to charge these enormous high tariffs, which are taxes on imports. So anybody that was going to import something into the United States was going to pay a high tax. Well, people don't, they're like, hey, I'm not paying this big tax just to import something into the U.S. So what did they do? They took up their marbles and left and went to play somewhere else. You can't do that in international trade. You will smite yourself, and that's just what the Smoot-Hawley Act did. You have to have that exchange. Now, you've seen this before, and I'll refer to it a couple of times. When we look at our development, all right, because we're agriculture, and it's still very important. But Alicia, you did your research on agriculture. Very, 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 very important to our economy. Still is. All right. So we're talking 1776. We had a lot of invention, late 1800s and 1900s, right? So, we had the Industrial Revolution. People came from farms and started to work in cities and factories, and we had mass production occur. We had a lot of products developed from the United States, and the United States world leader in regards to the industrialized world leader, all right? So then, we have the crash, 1929, 1930, all right? And after the crash, we have Reconstruction, 1936, we have John Maynard Keynes come on the scene with his theory of employment, money, and interest, all right? And then December 4th, 1941, the date that will always live in infamy, which is the date of what? Please remember history.
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, all right? That's the day we entered into World War II, all right? So we have World War II happening, all right? And we know after World War II, we had Reconstruction. Reconstruction was the time where we had global market activity come into a big play. And this is where we're at in what I'm talking about. So this is post-World War II. We had to do something in regards to international trade. We were no longer, all of mass production and industrial revolution in regards to, we are still a world leader, but now competition has entered in, and that is post-World War II. So that's our time frame. So that's what we're looking at. So we understand that I need to do, as an economy, what I can produce best and what I can produce the cheapest. So some of the things that we want to, is this baby on? All right, some of the things that we have to understand in regards to international trade for the U.S. What do we export? We export a lot of our chemicals, agricultural products, which is what I said. Even though, technology is very important, it's what bumps out our PPF curve and economic growth. Agriculture is still very, very important. Durable goods, semiconductors, and aircrafts. All right? So we, as a world market, we offer about 8.1% of the world's exports. Now, when President Obama took office, one of the goals in his first State of the Union address was to double our exports to make us more viable on the international market. And believe it or not, we're real close to it. We've done an extreme good job in regards to increasing our exports. The United States is a world leader in exporting oil. In regards to the world market, even though we use a lot of oil, we also export quite a bit of that. So that's how we look. But again, it's important that we know what we're doing as it relates to what do we do best? What do we do best? Okay. Please note also in your notes, I won't go to the slide, Canada is our biggest trading partner. Remember NAFTA? Did I talk about NAFTA? What's NAFTA? Somebody tell me. What is NAFTA? We'll talk about trade blocks and we'll also talk about these. What's NAFTA? What's it stand for? N-A-F-T-A. No? Okay, from any other class, do you know what NAFTA is? Okay, here it is. It is the North American Free Trade Agreement. Okay? Now, here's my kinesthetic exercise so you remember the three countries. And I say this is because I had to pull together some econ students to sit in with a live video conference with a university. We were doing a live video conference in Mexico. And so we had these economic students from Mexico in Northampton Community College, but it was an intercultural communications class, and they didn't have any econ students. So I pulled my econ students for them to come in and be a part of it so that they could, talk about the international trade, because the other students didn't know about NAFTA, didn't even know what it was. And these Mexican students were all up in arms about NAFTA. They were not happy campers. Because NAFTA involves Canada, that's above us, the United States, and Mexico. So that's my kinesthetic move. So Canada, United States, and Mexico. Those are the three countries. When it comes to actual trade, the country that benefited the most from NAFTA was Canada. Mexico, we have a lot of companies that have gone to Mexico because of NAFTA. The legislation was passed, 1984? like 1984, 86, somewhere around there, but we had, you know, a whole lot of things happen. But until it actually got there, it was really the 90s where we saw some things manifested. But we have a lot of companies that moved to Mexico, but they went down to Mexico, they pay cheaper wage rates. And so the Mexican people are doing the same jobs that United States workers would be doing for a lot less. And in addition to that, they don't have the Environmental Protection Agency laws that we have for dumping and chemicals. And there's been a very, very big increase in birth defects. And so when these Mexican students were talking to our NCC students, they were really mad and really passionate, I'll say that, as it relates to NAFTA. Because it's a free trade. So that means between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, trade can happen freely with no blocks, no restrictions. So it's free trade. But very important part, again, knowing what we do best. In regards to imports, we import, of course, petroleum. We import automobiles, metals, household appliances, and computers. So we send out computers and we import computers at the same time. Same thing with aircrafts. Is this a little final too? Yeah. Chapter 20 and 21, yes. And this model will be on the final. Okay. You got it? No. Computers. Does anybody have an LG product in your house? You do? Do you know who manufactures, what country it comes from? Where?
Here. Is it like Japan?
No, not Japan. Does anybody know LG?
South Korea.
Korea. LG has gotten an opportunity to get a slither into household appliances and busted. I mean, they've really done a good job in regards to their household appliance market. And so now we're thinking LG like GE, like it's just Americana, and that's not the case. Remember I told you that after World War II, a whole lot of competition started to happen. It took a couple of years, but you know, when I think of even my childhood, the appliances that we had in our house were all American made. My father was a true patriot, served in the Korean War, flew the United States flag in front of our house every Flag Day, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, that kind of thing, and would never buy a foreign-made car. There was nothing but a Buick or an Oldsmobile driving up into that driveway. That was it. So our appliances were things like RCA and, you know, GE. They were American products. Emerson TVs, which you don't even hear of. It wasn't a little till later on in my parents' life that they actually would buy something that was foreign made. It was just, they were from a mindset that you just didn't do that. You just didn't. You bought something that was domestically manufactured. So we have a change in the mindset, but foreign trade, that's where we have a lot of activity in household appliances. Now, there are two areas of international trade where we look at how we're going to make this happen. And comparative advantage is one. Now, what I mean by comparative advantage is the nation that produces that product the cheapest is the one that's supposed to do it. And I'm going to let you get this down, and then when you have this down, let's turn in your book, and I'll start with our model. And so turn to page 446. This is the United States and Mexico, beef and vegetables. So what we're doing with comparative advantage is we're looking to see who has the lower opportunity costs, and that's the key. So with comparative advantage, we're trying to determine who has the lower opportunity cost. And what is opportunity cost from chapter 1? What is opportunity cost? How do we define opportunity cost? Guys, remember chapter 1. Remember we talked about A-Rod and Oprah and who's the other one? Somebody, some other famous person. They had an opportunity cost.
It was LeBron.
And LeBron James. What was opportunity cost? It is the cost of what?
Doing something?
Goods forgone.
Pardon?
Like goods like forgone.
It is the cost of what you forego. All right? So, if I've got my 5 factors of production, labor, land, capital, entrepreneurship, information and technology, and I put my 5 factors of production together, what is it that I can specialize in that I will have the lower opportunity cost? That is the one, that is the good that I should produce and bring to the table. Okay, so once you have this down, turn to page 448. We're going to work with this model. It is the production possibilities curve frontier. It's the same model that we had in chapter 1, believe it or not. But we're going to do a little something different with it, and we're going to do a little problem with it, a couple problems with it. Okay? So we have 2 countries. Again, just kind of going back to my Knights of the Round Table. Countries are coming, they have their resources, and they need to specialize in what they do best, because if they try to produce everything for their economy, it's going to be just way too much, and they're going to have a loss of efficiency. All right, so you all there? Can move on? Yes? All right. So here we go. We have the United States. We have Mexico. The 2 commodities that we're looking at is beef and vegetables. All right? So, first thing we need to do is take a look at the United States. Now, point A is saying that at this point, and this is our line of choices, and I'll describe that in just a minute, that before we specialize, United States can produce 18 tons of beef and 12 tons of vegetables, right? Now, remember with chapter 1 and production possibilities table, if you look at page, let's kind of go back here. Let's go back. Let's go back to chapter 1. So flip all the way back to chapter 1. And turn to page 17. All right? So I'm still looking at the same model. And we had a choice between pizzas and robots. Remember this, like way back when in January? Yeah. And we said if we took all of our resources, and I'm looking at column A, to produce robots, we could produce 14,000 robots. If we looked at column E and we took all our resources to produce pizzas, we could produce 800,000 pizzas. So there's a choice between A, B, C, D, and E. That is what makes up this line. The only difference here, it's not a nonlinear line, this is linear. Okay? So the same principle. All right, so flip back to page 448. So what we're saying here is that if the United States takes all their resources to produce vegetables, they can make 30 tons of vegetables. If they take all their resources to beef, they can produce 30 tons of beef. So when I look at a ratio of beef to vegetables for the United States, all right, they have basically a 1-to-1 ratio. Does everybody see that? They can produce either 30 tons of vegetables or 30 tons of beef. All right? Now, if I move on with Mexico, their particular output, all right, they can produce, before specialization, 8 tons of beef or 4 tons of vegetables. Their choice in regards to their columns of activity, if they took all their resources to vegetables, they could produce 20 tons of vegetables or 10 tons of beef. So when I look at the extremes, for every ton of beef that they produce, how many tons of vegetables are they giving up? It's a 20 to 10 ratio. For every ton of beef that they are producing, how many tons of vegetables are they giving up? 2. Does everybody see that? All right, let's take a look at it again. If I produce, this is a 20 to 10 ratio, right? If I produce 1 ton, or let's just say, well, 1 ton of beef, all right? I have to give up double that amount of vegetables. So, the question we're trying to determine, who has the lower opportunity cost? Who should produce what? Well, if United States can go either way, but Mexico definitely should produce which? Beef or vegetables? Vegetables, right? Because they need to come to the table with what they can do best with the resources they have. So Mexico is going to produce the vegetables. The United States is going to produce the beef. Do you see that? That's the first question you have to answer. Is specialization. Who should specialize in what? And you have about 2 or 3 problems of this on your exam. So please note that. You have to determine specialization. Who should determine what? Who should produce what? Again, when you do that, then you come to the table and, determine your terms of trade and then actually trade. Because if I try to do everything for my economy, can the United States produce beef? Sure. Can Mexico produce beef? Sure. But it's not efficient. It's not efficient. It'll be a waste because they should specialize in what they do best at the lower opportunity cost, then come and trade. They'll be better off. Yes?
So when they trade, like when the U.S. and Mexico, when the United States and Mexico trade beef and vegetables, do the United States make up for does the United States trade the amount of beef that Mexico,
is giving up?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's a part of the terms of trade. We'll get there. Stay with me. All right. So now take a look at page 447. Now, what we described here was, initially, what are we looking at? We're looking at, and I'm going to move 2 slides ahead. What we're looking at initially is column 1. The specialization before, or outputs before specialization. The 18 and 12, the 8 and 4. All right? We just said that Mexico should produce vegetables. If they do, and all that the United States produces is beef, that means Mexico can produce 20 tons of vegetables and the United States can produce 30 tons of beef. All right? See that? So now we specialize. Then we go to the terms of trade. Now in your textbook for this particular example, if you actually, they put it kind of hidden in here. If you turn to page 448 and you read through, I think it's 1 for every 1.5. Yeah. Their actual terms of trade. Oh, yeah. Look at page 449, gains from trade. And you might want to underline this. The international terms of trade is, they said in this particular problem that they're going to give up 1 ton of beef for every 1.5 tons of vegetables. All right? You have to know that before you go to column 3. You got to know what your terms of trade are. So it's 1 ton of beef for every 1.5 tons of vegetables. So what does the United States and Mexico do? So what they decided to do, they came to the table, they decided to trade with those terms of trade, and the United States gave up, that's why it's a -10, they gave up 10 tons of beef. And those 10 tons of beef went to Mexico. In exchange, they received for 1 and 1.5, they received 15 tons of vegetables back. And those 15 tons of vegetables came from Mexico. It's a 1 to a 1.5 terms of trade. Does everybody see that? So we have to know what our terms of trade are as we go into this column. Now, with that said, what do we want to do? We want to make sure that when we come to this table, it is worth our while to actually trade. So now let's look at what are our outputs after trade. Well, United States started with 30 tons of beef. They gave up 10. They end up with 20. They didn't produce any vegetables. They got 15 tons at the table, so they end up with 15 tons of vegetables. Mexico didn't produce any beef because they're specializing in vegetables. They got 10 tons of beef, and so that's what they ended up with. They produced 20 tons of vegetables, gave up 15, and ended up with 5. What we're comparing to make sure this is worth our while is column 1 to column 5. So what is our gains for specialization? Well, before we specialized, when both economies were trying to produce both beef and vegetables, the United States could produce 18 tons of beef, but because they specialized and traded, they ended up with 20 tons of beef, which a gain of 2 tons of beef. The United States started with 12 tons of vegetables. They traded, ended up with 15 tons, a gain of 3. Mexico started with 8, started to trade, received 10, that's a gain of 2 between 8 and 10. Started with 4 tons of vegetables, and then actually specialized in vegetables, traded, ended up with 5 tons of vegetables for an increase of 1 ton of vegetables. So the benefit of coming to the table and trading is vital. It is vital for the wealth of your economy. You cannot take all of your 5 factors of production and produce everything for your economy and do it well. You're going to lose efficiency in your resources. What is it that you do best? That's why you needed to know what the United States exports. So we export semiconductors, we export aircrafts, we export petroleum, all those kinds of things. So we need to see the advantage of coming to the table and then seeing what the outcome is. So if you take a look over and turn your book over to page 449, let's take a look at this graph because this is what's telling us what it looks like now. All right, so we'll start with the United States, and this is in your textbook. So we started with 18 and 12, right? We then decided to do nothing but beef, all right? And in return for that, we got 15 tons of vegetables. That's where you get that blue area from 30 to 45. It's those tons of vegetables that we got. And basically what we ended up with is this A accent. We ended up with 20 tons of beef and 15 tons of vegetables. When we take a look at Mexico on the other side, and I can do this here, they then produced all of the vegetables. They started with 4 tons, they ended up with 5. Started with 8 tons of beef, ended up with 10, okay, for the 1 to 1.5 trade. Now, they didn't get as much in regards, it wasn't a one-to-one deal, but it's still worth their while to specialize and then trade. So that's where the gains of trade are so important. As I said, when we look at the crash of 1929 and 1930, and I said today I was going to refer to some legislation, and again, you have this in your textbook, and you read through as it relates to the Smoot-Hawley Act. I don't know why, but the United States decided that they were just going to tax everybody trying to bring something into the United States and make sure that everybody bought everything in our economy that was domestically produced. That was not the case, and everybody just took their marbles and left, and you just hurt yourself. So on page 460, on that first column, underlying Smoot-Hawley Act, Tariff Act, you will see that of 1930. So we're in the midst of the crash, and we're saying, okay, We want you to buy our stuff abroad, but if you want to bring your stuff into our country, you're going to have to pay a big tax. Yeah, right, buddy. So they just took up their marbles and left, and that we are in a severe, severe recession. Okay? All right, so when we look at, I'll get this into your notes, comparative advantage in regards to what it does for us, in regards to, looking at efficiency, and it promotes competition. And that's really important because we know, like with Adam Smith and the invisible hand of competition in your economy, if there's not competition, and in microeconomics, for those of you that are business administration majors, you will learn about the pitfalls of having monopolies in your economy, because you don't have competition. And without the lack of competition, we as consumers lose out, because you don't get the best of goods and services in your economy brought to the marketplace. So you need to have competition. So that's a comparative advantage. Who has the lower opportunity costs? Okay. Okay, can I move on? Yes, yes? No, no?
Yes.
Okay. Now, different from comparative advantage is what we call an absolute advantage. And when you have an absolute advantage, you literally have the corner on the market of that resource. Nobody can produce it cheaper than you. You have the access to the resource. And I'm going to show you a little YouTube clip. Take notes, because I do use this on the final as well. And it's a little dated because the resource that we're featuring here, and that is white diamonds, have been discovered in other parts of the world since this particular video, and De Beers no longer has an absolute advantage. So we're looking at De Beers diamonds and what we call, the white diamond market. And at one time in history, De Beers, anybody ever see the movie Blood Diamond? Blood Diamond. Who was that? That was a Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a little dated now, but it's a good film. But Blood Diamond really kind of takes you into the diamond market and shows you, what happens. At one point, De Beers actually controlled just about 90% of the white diamond market in the world. So they had an absolute advantage. Now, they did that, unfortunately, on the backs of the apartheid system and free labor. De Beers is basically known for having established the apartheid system of segregation in South Africa. My husband was in Africa a couple of years ago, and I remember I'm thinking, wow, I know diamonds are like real cheap there. And it's an 18-hour flight, and I'll never forget, because I said if I could get him at least through customs in Brussels with a diamond sewn maybe like in the bottom of his pocket or something, he could get there, because they were like in abundance. It was crazy. So, but De Beers at that point has what we call the absolute advantage in white diamonds. So I'm going to show you a little clip. As I said, take notes, and it has since changed for De Beers, again, because white diamonds are now in other parts of the world.
Nicky Oppenheimer, chairman of De Beers, for over 100 years the hub of a global diamond empire, greets the who's who of the current ANC government of South Africa, including the deputy president, Phumzile Lambonuka, one of the most powerful politicians in the country. They are here to open Diamond World, a theme park devoted to the commodity that built South Africa, diamonds. Then, as now, the state and De Beers stand firmly at each other's side. Only this time, the state is black.
This indeed is a splendid occasion, and it's fantastic for De Beers to have played a role in this process and getting us where we are today. Huge things have been done here, and it's particularly important to appreciate what diamonds have done for South Africa.
At the height of its power, De Beers controlled over 90% of the world's diamonds. It was one of the most successful monopolies in history, and it was built on the backs of cheap black labor. The De Beers mines made use of the segregated compound system. Miners were virtual prisoners unable to leave until their contracts were up. They made use of the pass laws. Once released from the compounds, miners had no free movement in the country. Their pass was good only for a return trip to their homeland. De Beers shaped many of the systems on which apartheid was later based. The whole country would become not unlike a De Beers diamond mining camp. When the apartheid regime collapsed and the ANC came to power in 1994, everyone wondered if the De Beers empire would survive under the new regime. But De Beers' overwhelming presence in South Africa's economy is what saved it. The ANC, like the apartheid government before it, depends on De Beers to sustain the economy. So at Diamond World, exploitation has become nostalgia. The children of the miners are the new rulers. Then, as now, the state has an interest in diamonds. And diamonds will serve anyone. Anyone with money and power, white or black.
Okay, so we see here, as I said, in regards to looking at an absolute advantage in difference in regards to a comparative advantage, is that De Beers at one point, as I said, had the absolute advantage in regards to white diamonds. It has changed now. De Beers does not hold that same position anymore because white diamonds are found in other parts of the world. And so there's more competition in that market. Remember, in talking about 5 factors of production, when you look at white diamonds, that's a natural resource in South Africa. And it's one thing, as I said before, to feed somebody a fish dinner. It's one thing to teach them how to fish. It's another thing that they own the pond. And with South Africa, they did not have control of their resources. And that's where so many countries, especially third world countries, that don't control their resources, what is it that they naturally have that they could bring to the table where they find themselves at a disadvantage? And until they have control of the resource, then they're able to come to the table and trade and benefit their own economy. All right. Next, I want to, and we're going to do a couple of problems here, but I'm going to just go ahead and finish some notes because typically I would do problems and come back. But let's just finish this. So turn to page 453. Just want to talk about, no, we already did this. in regards to overall activity with supply and demand, still looking at this point, we're looking at the aluminum market, what that means for, you know, the international market, and then also what that means for the domestic market. So now we're looking at what does the United States do in the aluminum market, U.S. So the amount of aluminum that we can produce and how much it's going to be per pound in U.S. dollars. So from our basic demand and supply, and this is chapter 3, very simple, we're saying that we're producing 100 million pounds of aluminum at $1 a piece. When we take that and then export it to the international market, what does that look like if we're charging $1? So when we look at the dollar price per pound for the U.S. Import demand, now what this is looking at, again, in regards to supply and demand, still supply and demand, still red and green, so still color coded. So we can understand that going forward, that obviously our law of demand says as prices go down, the quantity demanded increases. As prices increase, the quantity supplied increases. So what it's saying that if we can get more on the international market, we're going to supply what? More. If the price decreases on the international market, we're going to supply less. All right? So what we have to do is look at what we're selling our aluminum for on the market, and then also what other countries are selling their aluminum for on the market. So the country that we're going to look at, and we understand surplus and all of that, is now take a look at Canada. Remember I told you Canada is our biggest trading partner. Biggest trading partner. Now with Canada and their supply and demand, they're looking at 75 cents per pound, right? So when they come to the international market with 75% per pound, boy, you know, we're at $1, they're at 75 cents. They're able to then produce quite a bit more and sell a little bit more. So therefore, if we take a look at, again, remember we have the free trade agreement as well, United States and Canada all together in regards to who's going to do what, all right? So we have 75 cents and we have $1 per pound. What price are we going to go with in the market? Internationally, we coming to an equilibrium of 88 cents. So we have to then look at how we're going to perform on the international market. If we're at $1, they're at 75 cents per pound, you know, where's this equilibrium going to be? Because will everybody buy it from Canada? Everybody buy the United States. We can't come to the international market with $1 per pound because we're going to lose out. Okay? And if Canada came to the market at 75 cents, they could actually make more. So they really wouldn't charge 75 cents because why charge 75 cents when I can get 88 cents a pound? Make sense? All right. So that's what those charts are talking about there. All right. Now, things in regards to international trade, I talked about tariffs in the Smoot-Hawley Act. Tariffs are taxes that are put on imports. We can also have quotas that can come into our economy, how much we are going to allow to come into our economy. Now, it's going to be what's the temperature for today? Like 60?
High of 57.
Oh, maybe because of clouds? Is that why it seemed low? All right, everybody, we know bugs are starting to come alive, right? Everybody know what stink bug is, right? Everybody know what stink bug is? That hard shell bug, if you smash it, it stinks. All right? Do you know that stink bugs are not native to the United States? They are an Asian bug. Do you know how they got to this part of the country, northeast part? Through the Allentown Post Office.
What?
Yes. A package came in from the Asian area of the world, and apparently had some bugs and things in it attached to it, and they came to northeast region of this Pennsylvania, loved it, and just went wild. Now you can go to Giant, and around this time you'll start seeing stink bug repellent in stink bug traps. There's a whole market to try to get rid of stink bugs, and stink bugs are not even domestic. They are not native to the United States. Is that crazy or what? So somebody said, yeah, we got these stink bugs and they're multiplying, they're all over the place. And I live near a lot of trees. A lot of trees. So there are times when I look at, my screens out, on the outside, and those stink bugs come alive and they're hanging on to the screen. I'm like, dude, I have in my garage stink bug traps hung. I mean, it's a whole market on something that actually was not native born. Not native born. Interesting. So now you know about stink bugs. Allentown Post Office. Allentown Post Office. Blame it all on them. All right. What this does in regards to barriers to trade, just so that you can take a look at it as at a model. And what we're looking at, okay, so we have supply and demand of this product coming in and a quota. But if we take a look at putting some things in place, and this is just basically looking at what does this mean in regards to I wanted to use this one. A little too far. Okay. In regards to the supply, but then also the supply plus the quota, and what does this mean? What I'm just really wanting you to get from this is that there is an effect, all right, in regards to overall, the supply and how much quota, what does that mean in regards to our quantity? It will affect it. Tariffs affect how much. Quotas affect how much. I'm not so much concerned about you redrawing that or anything like that, but just know that they can affect how much is brought into the country, okay? Let's move on to legislation. A couple of things we want to have in your notes. You will see this again, the General Treatment on Tariffs and Trades, GATT, which was formed during Reconstruction after World War II. It's now called the World Trade Organization, all right? We also have the European Union, which is a trade bloc. It is not a free trade agreement. The EU is a trade bloc. So a trade bloc, when they come to the table, they come as one voice. They come as one voice. Very important. The currency for the European Union is what? What's the currency they use? The euro. The euro. And the euro, in regards to purchasing power in comparison to US dollar, is bigger. And depending on how well things are going in the international market, we'll either do well or not. But again, they are one voice. And then again, I already talked about the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is free trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico.
Which one did you say comes as like a block or something?
EU. They are trade bloc. They come to the table as one voice. One voice.
Are we gonna have to know all these abbreviations for the final?
Yeah. All right. Two other organizations I want you to write after that fourth dot, that fourth bullet. Number one is the World Bank. And number two, after that, is the International Monetary Fund. They were both established after World War II. Now, they have differences in regards to their purposes in regards to loans and member countries and things of that sort. But when we take a look at this kind of trade agreements and activities, the financial market of who was involved, the World Bank, which has had its qualms and its challenges, as well as the International Monetary Fund. But, dealing with third world countries, developing countries, and loans, the World Bank giving out loans to member banks, this is also important in regards to also international activity. You guys remember in in your last exam when we looked at the debt of the United States, and there was so much debt outside of the United States, remember? There was a big significant slice of that pie. A part of that, the reason why that was in place now is because of the trade or the agreements we had with the IMF and the World Bank after World War II, and giving out loans that we'll never get anything back on. Okay? All right. So one last thing just in regards to GATT so that you know, and then we're going to go to do a couple of problems. So GATT. GATT is a treaty and an organization. Please note that. It is a treaty and an organization after World War II. A treaty and an organization. GATT is now called the WTO. It's now called the World Trade Organization. That's what, so GATT is really the coming to the table at the end of the war, getting this treaty, getting the organization established, having the round talks, and then now called the World Trade Organization. All right, so once you have that down, turn in your book to page 468. We're going to do number 2, and then I'm going to have you guys do number 3. So let's put this in your notes. This will give practice for Connect. What do we have? We have New Zealand and Spain. All right, so let's start with New Zealand. Okay. This particular problem is set up a little different than Mexico, the United States, and beef and the okay, we have apples, we have plums, we have New Zealand, and we have Spain. Okay? So let's read it through. Now, everybody see I'm on page 468. Number 2, the accompanying hypothetical production possibilities tables are for New Zealand and Spain. Each country can produce apples and plums. Plot the production possibilities data for each of the 2 countries separately, referring to your graphs in the following. You can do that on your own time. I'm not concerned about that. Now, letter A. We see New Zealand. We see Spain's production possibilities frontier. What is each country's cost ratio of producing plums and apples? So let's take a look at New Zealand. Production alternatives. What are the ratio like we did for beef and vegetables for Mexico and Spain? If New Zealand produces all plums, how many can they produce? Because you're going to have this, you have 2 problems like this on your final.
10.
If they produce all plums, New Zealand. 15. Does everybody see that? If they take all their resources to apples, how many can they produce? 60. So when I look at a ratio of 15 to 60, for every plum they produce, how many apples are they giving up? 4. Does everybody see that? All right?
How'd you get 4?
15 to 60. 15 to 60. Okay? So New Zealand, in regards to apples and plums, so we have a 1 to 4 ratio. So for every apple they produce, or every plum they produce, they give up 4 apples. Let's look at Spain. Now, so that's R, S, T, and U. If Spain produces all plums, how many can they produce?
60.
If they produce all apples. So they have what type of ratio?
1 to 1.
Okay, so Spain has a 1 to 1 ratio. Does everybody see that? So, letter B, which nation should specialize in which product?
Wait, you want to say that again?
Yes, tell me. Who should produce what? Right, so New Zealand should produce apples, and Spain is going to produce the plums. Write that down so you know who's doing what. So New Zealand is going to produce the apples because they have to give up so many plums to produce apples, so they should just do the product that has the lower opportunity cost for them. Make sense? Lower opportunity cost. This is comparative advantage. All right, so now This one, as it says, a little different. Letter C, showing the trading possibilities line for each nation. What if the actual terms of trade was 1 plum for 2 apples? All right. So if they traded, all right. So if they traded 1 plum for 2 apples, and we said that New Zealand is going to produce the apples, right? And Spain is going to produce the plums. And our terms of trade is 1 apple equals 1 plum. All right? So, if they trade everything, not that it's like it's a 1 to a 1.5, but they're not trading like 15 and 10. If New Zealand, pardon?
1 to 2 apples.
Pardon?
One
One plum for 2
Oh,
apples.
to 2 apples. 1
Plum for 2 apples.
for 2 apples. Sorry about that. I'm going to put it this way since it's right in the book. Okay. So, if we said that New Zealand is going to produce all the apples, and they produce 60 apples, right? How many plums are they going to get back? If it's a 1 to 2 ratio,
30.
and if they produce 60 apples, how many plums are they going to get back? 30. Okay, so write that down because we want to plot it. If Spain produces 60 plums, how many apples are they going to get back? 1 to 2. How much?
Wait, say it one more time.
If they produce 60 plums, how many apples will they get back?
120.
120. Very good. All right, so write that down. So, just so I don't have to. So now what we need to do is we need to plot this. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me just do this here. We're going to actually plot this to see what this looks like. So, initially, we have plums and we have apples. Okay? We have plums and we have apples. So this is going to be Spain, and this is going to be New Zealand. All right? We said New Zealand, we understood 50 to 60 in regards to how much they would be able to produce. And then with Spain, it was really a 1-to-1 ratio, 60 to 60, right? Then they came and traded everything. As a result of New Zealand's trade, they were going to get back, and I'll do this another color, they were going to get back another 15 plums for the apples that they produced, while Spain was going to get an additional 60. And we said 120. So that's what the production possibilities trading curve looks like. Now, letter D. Suppose that the optimal product mixes before specialization in trade were alternative B for New Zealand and S for Spain. So put a circle around for New Zealand B, which means they produced 20 tons of apples and 10 tons of plums. New Zealand produced on S 20 tons of apple and 40 tons of plums. Everybody see that? Everybody see that? We're looking at B and we're looking at S. Okay? Now, what we're saying is if they started out if they started out there, so let's just say New Zealand I'm gonna just do these separately. And with apples and plums, and before specialization, New Zealand was at 20 apples and 10 plums, right? And then Spain, in regards to apples and plums, was at 20 and then 40. What the question is asking is, what is the benefit of trade in regards to overall production? How many apples do we have all together here produced?
40.
All right? And we have 50 plums. That is before specialization. Then they decide to specialize. And when they specialized, who did what? We said that New Zealand is going to produce the apples, and they're going to produce how many apples? How many apples are they going to produce? How many apples are they going to produce? 60. All right. So specialization, we have 60 apples produced, and we have 60 plums produced, correct? So after specialization, what's the benefit? What is the benefit of trade? Well, before specialization, we had 40 tons produced overall. Now we have 60, so there's a gain of 20. We had 50 before, now we have 60, so there's a gain of 10. So again, if I come together and I do what I do best, not only am I going to benefit, everybody is going to benefit. Yes?
Is there things like, could various countries pair together and trade as a whole and then trade on the market?
And what's that called?
Trade.
A trade bloc. That is the European Union. They come to the table, I erased it. They come as one voice, a trade bloc. All right? Or you can have free trade, which is Canada, United States, and Mexico. Let's just get it rolling. Okay? All right, so what I'm going to do on Wednesday, we're going to take this and dovetail this into exchange rates in regards to international trade, exchange rates, and dollar index purchasing power. All right, so you'll have, I didn't get a chance to do number 3, but you'll have a problem like that in Connect as well.